and be sure to introduce yourself.
Well, but not yet. Okay. So are people arriving now? Yay,
Yes,
I
go ahead.
see some
Go ahead.
people. Okay. So I'm just gonna kind of kick the ball off here while we're waiting for people to come in to say, basically ask you a question, and you can use the chat feature to answer. So it's Saturday morning, at least here in Portland, and you're here at Product Camp. What made you decide to be here? Thank you, Madison. Yeah, so as you come into the room, just consider what made you decide to be at Product Camp today. And I'm just going to let this be somewhat interactive, so get your chat fingers ready. Awesome, to learn, to grow.
And Laura, recall there's a little bit of delay from your audio to the time
Oh,
it
okay.
lands in yours.
Cool. I'll keep that in mind. Being a better product manager, I see a lot of that. Meet smart people. Connect with product folks. Yeah, so a lot of things that sound like they are about learning, about caring about connecting with people, and maybe becoming better in your own work. Love it. So today we're going to be talking about product market fit and some of the challenges around it and how we can speed it up. So just to give a little bit of an agenda here, we're going to talk about what is product market fit, how do we measure it, what slows us down in achieving product market fit, and then, of course, how we can make it faster. And if we have time, we'll do kind of a little, what I call product therapy, so a little more self-reflection. So I'm Laure, like folklore, and I'm the head of research at Marco Polo, the popular video messaging app. Tell me in the chat, anyone using Marco Polo? About one person. Let's see. So I've been doing customer research and discovery for about 15 years and UX for about 7 years. And before getting into the B2C tech world, I worked in independent film, streaming, and B2B consumer tech, or B2B tech. So it's great to see some familiar faces. All right, yeah. So I just want to do a little bit of acknowledgement here. So Portland rests on traditional village sites of the Multnomah, Pethlamet, Clackamas, Chinook, Tualatin Kapuya, Molalla, and many other tribes who made their homes along the Columbia River. The city of Seattle rests on unceded Coast Salish land, specifically the ancestral land of the Duwamish, Suquamish, Stillaguamish, and Muckleshoot tribes. Vancouver rests on the unceded territory of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. In acknowledging this, I want to also acknowledge that really acknowledgement isn't enough. And so we have a lot to do to work on the effects of colonialism everywhere. Okay, so let's talk about product market fit. So I will be trying to look at the chat for responses to things I'm asking about, but if you actually have questions, I would recommend using the Q&A feature because it's probably going to get lost in the chat box. So what is product market fit? So there are some folks that you probably recognize the names of here who have some thoughts on it, and let's just sort of talk through them. I think, some of them I have more agreement with than others. So Mark Andreessen says product market fit means being in a good market with a product that can satisfy that market. Um, and I think as we'll see as we go through this, maybe being able to satisfy isn't quite enough. Dave McClure says a startup is a company that is confused about one, what its products is, two, who its customers are, and three, how to make money. I think that's a pretty good description of not having product market fit. Maybe I might order that slightly differently. Eric Rees says the term product market fit describes the moment in which a startup finally finds a widespread set of customers that resonate with this product. And I will say finally might be a good word there. And then this might be, Sam Altman's quote might be the one that I think illustrates kind of the biggest misconception for product people. Before product market fit, your only job is to build a great product. And I see volume is low. I'm not quite sure I might gotta address that, but we'll just keep at it. Turn your volume all the way up for this presentation, please. So this quote by Steve Blank is a little bit more in line with how I feel about, thinking about product market fit. So let me kind of give you a little spoiler alert for the rest of the talk and make my best stab at a definition. So when I think of product market fit, I think it's when you are predictably able to add customers by understanding what they value, how much they value, when they value it, and you can provide that value at a price they are willing to pay. And of course, that depends on the alternatives that they consider in the context of the problem your product solves. So before we talk about how to get there, let's look at some of the ways that the product market fit could be measured. So Sean Ellis, growth hacker, Sean Ellis, came up with this metric, which basically consists of surveying customers to discover how many of them would be very disappointed if they could no longer use your product. Now, I'm about to tell you that how customers feel is really important, but I don't really love this metric for a couple of reasons. One, it doesn't suggest how many customers you have to have, and so what if you have 10 customers and 4 of them would feel disappointed? Are you at product market fit? Maybe not. And then also, most of the ways that we get this kind of data is from surveys, and surveys are subject to a ton of sampling bias. So, the people who respond to surveys often are the people who feel strongly one way or the other about whatever you're asking about. So this might be a little bit better for me as a way of thinking about things. So this comes from Lean Analytics, and basically it's saying that you should be measuring different things depending on which stage you're at. So you can use things like retention, virality, cost of acquisition, lifetime value at different points of your journey as a company to decide whether you're ready to move from finding fit to scaling. And when you have product market fit, you can scale because you know how to get customers. Now, in the sort of last stage of this from revenue to scale, if you have lower cost of acquisition than lifetime value, then you're in business. Now, you could scale if that's not the case, but it won't be sustainable. And have you heard of MoviePass? But most of the problem that happens with product market fit is in the stickiness phase. Because, as entrepreneurs and product people, we'll be like, oh, customers like our product, so we can scale, and kind of skip a few of those steps. Also, product market fit is interesting because it's not just about having a product that meets a need and has a distribution channel. So remember how Mark Andreessen said, being in a good market with a product that can satisfy that market is the path to product market fit. So here you may recognize or not some of these products. Facebook has been known to copy other up-and-coming apps and fail, despite having pretty much the same features. They have a top-notch engineering team and much larger distribution channel. this kind of contradicts a common misconception that what product market fit depends on are features or distribution channels or even having a large market. It might be even more likely that you'll make a product that reflects customer values when you can focus on that customer segment. Whereas if you're Facebook, you have a lot of competing objectives. Okay, so let's talk about how to get product market fit now that we know how you can tell whether you have it. So this is the Lean Startup, which has been a huge influence in the world of product management for a long time. And we hear all the time, about building MVPs and being simple. And I think that it really encouraged people to do this to make their velocity faster and to fail faster. But what if it actually makes making product market fit slower? So the mantra here in Lean Startup is build, measure, learn. Building first can really go quickly if you're doing MVPs, but if you're building in the wrong direction from the start, then your measurement will only reflect a local maxima. And that'll mean that you're iterating to solve a less valuable problem, and you'll miss the learning that can be had by putting more focus on what people value from the start. Oops. So another way that we've seen in the annals of history of product development is the idea of doing like customer research that is really about what do people want to buy. And, people would do all this market research and try to figure out what do people want and what can we sell them. And it turned out to be fairly risky to do it that way too, because research was about what people want within this very narrow space of your product that you want to build and not what they care about. So you'll see in this slide a little inset of Singles. This was a product that was launched in 1974, and it was developed, it went through lots of testing to make sure that the actual food in there is delicious. It's basically food in a jar, and it was aimed at single people. And turns out single people didn't really value being sold baby food for them. So being an adult baby wasn't really the single person's accept of themselves. So what makes your product a success? And here's where I'd love to see in the chat some hypotheses. A little bit here. What makes your product a success? I think we're in a little delay, so it might take a second or two. No one has any guesses? There we go. Okay, delighted customers. Good one. Right thing, right time. Sales. Retention. Align with customer values. It works. It works. So that's a good one. It solves a significant problem. Timing. It is delightful for customers to use and viable for the business. You can solve a customer problem and it's profitable. Okay, profitable might be a little tautological here, but yes. The success criteria you've previously established. All right, well, I'm going to give some thoughts from my end. I don't think that it's innovative or new technology. I also don't think that it's really about how important the problem is. That's one that we hear a lot about. And I actually don't think it's about great design and UX and delightfulness per se. So what could it be? Well, here's a shock. It's if your customer buys it. So this almost seems so obvious that it doesn't need to be said. But if we don't focus on that basic truth, we're likely to get distracted by things that feel more easy to control, like how do we build this? Or what is the best value proposition for what we built without first learning what our customers care about? So Marty Kagan, a hero of all of us, I'm sure, shares this idea that there are 4 big risks in product development, and the most challenging is whether customers will buy it or users will choose to use it. I think that this quote is a good summary, whatever you think of Microsoft, about how to think about this. So now let's talk about, the process a little bit. So here's I linked to all of these articles at the end. I can share with you. But basically, as you can see here, this proposes, and I think we're moving towards this in general in product management, that the first step is really learning from people. So the why, that's what we're learning. And I think we want to know why people buy our product, but unfortunately, we can't just ask them that directly. Most of the time, they'll just tell us what we want to hear, or they'll fail to come up with really any insight at all. So let's think about whys. There are a lot of things that motivate us, and it's not the same for everyone. But there are some interesting things about how motivation ties in with and reflects your values. So this image that you're seeing here comes from Susan Fowler, who's authored a bunch of books on motivation. And she sees things in this spectrum. And as you can see, the kind of motivation that are most impactful are aligned with high quality psychological needs. The motivations that are most impactful or most relevant for us are the middle 4. So that's external, imposed, aligned, and integrated. So what are these types of motivations? External is when you get some kind of status or reward. Imposed is when you believe that you would suffer a consequence by not doing the behavior. Aligned is that you link a behavior with something that you care about or value, and integrated is when you link a behavior with your life's purpose. So as product people, this can be a little scary. The aligned and integrated motivations are driven by a person's internal outlook, things that we simply can't change. The levers we do have are by definition external, so things like price or rewards. But the motivation that is meaningful, lasting, and rewarding for customers is internal. Let me say it again. We can't change what people value or what their life purpose is. So what can we do? Well, we need to understand values. Values are what we care about. It's what guides us to do or make the decisions that we do. Values are also persistent. So when you understand someone's values, you can build products that help them do what they want to do. So you've seen this pyramid of needs before. Values are universal because they're human. We have needs that motivate us to act. Interestingly, the further up of Maslow's hierarchy we look, products that deliver that value typically are perceived as more valuable. Whereas if you're just meeting the needs on the bottom of the pyramid, you're basically making commodities. But learning what people care about, a product can become more valuable, even if it seems like it's just solving a basic need. So take water. You can't really get a more basic need. And luckily for most Americans, you can get this product for almost nothing or even free. Doesn't exactly sound like a promising market. Yet sometime in the last part of the 20th century, time when Americans probably had the most access to this almost free product, we saw an explosion of a new market for water. And most of these products were identical to the water you can get from a tap. In fact, in March of 2017, for the first time, the most popular bottled beverage in the US was water. Well, what happened? I'm going to let you guess. What made this product, bottled water, so successful? see. Anyone have guesses? Trust, safe for drinking, marketing. Yeah, okay, yeah, marketing. Well, marketing certainly played a large role in making this happen, but what was the message that resonated? So as people began sort of seeing this obesity epidemic in the United States, and it was associated with sugary drinks, people began to think of water as a healthy alternative. Some people value health a lot, and it's a value that's driven the sales of all kinds of products in the past. Remember when carbs were the new health food? So there's a market for bottled water because people value health, but it turns out that customer loyalty is a little hard to achieve in the water market, and actually sales eventually kind of flattened out. But maybe it's possible to make something stand out and maybe even be more valuable in the water market. So one way to think about this is what's something that people who value health might also value. In some cases, turns out to be the health of others. So Charity Water sold this bottle of water for $20. With that kind of price tag, what you're buying better be worth a lot. In this case, the nonprofit gives 100% of all of its earnings to support projects in places where clean water is hard to come by. You might not be purchasing this product every day, but the reason you're buying doesn't really have much to do with how thirsty you are. So the value driving sales here is more meaningful, and that's why it can be more expensive. So another way of framing wants is by thinking about everything being sort of falling into this bucket of security, control, or approval. And this is there's a little woo background to this. So this is part of something called the Sedona method. If you're interested in finding out more about that. But think about, oops, yeah, wrong computer now. There we go. Think about Airbnb. So, Airbnb found product market fit very much by thinking about those kind of values. So, at Trust played a really big part in how successful they were able to become. At first, they're basically competing against couchsurfing, but once they wanted to get bigger and compete against hotels, they had to recognize that both hosts and guests really had a need for trust. So they added many ways to increase trust, like having reviews, professional photo listings, verifying listings, and creating customer support. And then they were able to give people the sense of trust. So we just don't know. That's kind of the crux of what I think here. We know that we want to make something that people value, but we may think we know what people value, but a lot of times we really don't. For example, we often think that everybody really wants everything to be easier and faster, and anything that makes our lives easier and faster should be more valuable. So if you think about people who are trying to bake cakes, they're usually pretty busy, as we all know now from being housekeepers for the last year. In 1933, a company called P. Duff & Sons created a revolutionary new product. It was cake mix. All you had to do was add water, stir it, bake, and voila, you had a wonderful cake. By the 1940s, lots of companies had a version of this, but even with lots of marketing, sales were flat. And then General Mills interviewed women who were the target customers and learned that the simplicity of the mix made it feel like they didn't have a sense of satisfaction by making the cake. So General Mills reformulated so that consumers actually had to add eggs. And suddenly the business exploded. Suddenly it was a skill to make a great cake with a mix. And as you can see, they were able to up the ante with multiple cookbooks to make cake mix cakes like a huge skill. Behavioral economist Dan Ariely calls this the IKEA effect. When you build something it becomes overvalued to you. So it actually turns out that our customers know what they care about. But wait, you say, what about the old adage of Henry Ford? If he had asked his customers what they wanted, they would have said a faster horse. Well, didn't say that, but pretend. Steve Jobs, who likes that Henry Ford quote, said, some people say give the customers what they want, but that's not my approach. Our job is to figure out what they're going to want before they do. It sounds great. I mean, we just figure out what people are going to want before they do, and the dollars start rolling in. As long as we can channel the future, we are in great shape. I think Jobs was wrong and right. We don't want to ask people what products they want or what features, but seriously, the only way to know what people care about is to ask them, or to learn from them, I should say. So let's discover. You can learn a lot by talking to people. If you know what makes someone your ideal customer, then you can really talk to just about 10 or 15 people and learn exactly what you need to build and how to convey its value. So you can skip lots of sort of fruitless MVP versions in the process. The key is to ask the right questions. So in the next section, I'm going to be walking through some of the components and ideas behind value discovery. This could easily be a few talks in itself, so we're really only going to scratch the surface. But if you have questions, please reach out. So basically, value discovery helps us think about the customers that make up, create customer perception of value. So the customer is obvious. You need to know who you want to serve. You need to know what do you want that customer to do. And I'm using customer here. User could also apply, although I think that, I'll return to that concept later. The context, so what will affect their decision, and when are they doing it, when are they doing it, how are they doing it, where are they doing it, and then the alternatives, what could they do instead? So value discovery has a few key components, and mostly it's about getting really clear. So we want to be very clear about these 4 topics. So our business goal. Before we learn our customers' values, we really need to know what metric that we're trying to impact. So that will actually impact what kind of questions we ask the customer. Then we want to talk to the right customer. So, we always want to create a large market, but when we do this research, we really want to drill down on who is really the ideal best customer for us. And that could be because they, can pay for our thing. It could be because we think that they're really the people who will benefit from our product the most. We also want to figure out how hard it is to reach this customer. Then before we interview, we want to really get specific about what we want to learn and debias our questions so we get trustworthy data. So some of the questions that we ask in values discovery, there's a bunch of different categories. And depending on the business goal, we would focus in on some of these areas more than others. For example, if we're trying to really learn how to position a product, then we would be really drilling down into alternatives. But all of these things can really give you great insights into what your customers value. Then we go into interviewing. Now, interviewing is my bread and butter, so I wanted to give a few tips here. It does take some practice, and probably the biggest thing is really learning to not lead the witness. So, you really don't want to reveal anything about your opinion about what they're saying, but you still want to kind of be like vaguely encouraging so that their deeper knowledge and experience can emerge. So you want people to feel comfortable and make them feel like they're the expert, which they are. You also want to listen for the unsaid. So people know what they care about, but they might actually not always be conscious of it. So For example, a researcher at Wharton Business School, Jonah Berger, who wrote a wonderful book called Contagious, I recommend it highly, did some research that suggests that people may not always be aware that social influence is a big part of what's going on for them. And most people say other people's opinions actually don't really matter, but turns out sometimes they do. So that is why we ask customers in these interviews about something that actually happened. So we can learn if they asked other people about the decision, or if they consulted reviews or other things that might give us clues that there's a social influence. We don't want to answer questions. So when you're interviewing, one of the hardest things is when people will ask you what the right answer is, or to tell them more about the product so that they can have a better answer, things like that. If you can learn how to answer a question with something like, "Oh, that's interesting. Tell me more about what you mean," or tell me more about what you're thinking, then that can really help. And you can let them know that you'll answer questions at the end of the interview after you've gotten your good data. Lastly, context. So if you can conduct interviews in the same setting that they were in when they were making a decision, it's ideal, especially for B2B. You may be able to observe aspects of what they really care about that don't really come to mind when you're just interviewing out of context. And then in analysis, we really should see patterns of values that are very clear and inform us what to do. So if you don't have clear signal after you've done these interviews, really look to see whether there might have been differences in the customer base that you're talking to. So when you're talking to 10 to 15 ideal customers, maybe that you didn't account for some aspect of them that really makes them into like 2 ideal customers. Okay. Looks good on time. So let's move on to this little section, product therapy. So what really gets in the way of achieving product market fit? A few years ago, I saw Alan Albert, who I believe is here. Say hi, Alan. Gave a talk at Product Camp Seattle. And if you've been to past product camps, you've probably seen Alan doing his award-winning audience talks. I also was impressed, and so I ended up hiring Alan to help us at Marco Polo with the project. And then I'm now continuing to learn some of his ideas, and a lot of those ideas you've already heard, but we're going to talk a little bit more. And then also just to try to help other people learn more about these ideas. So in his talk back then, he incorporated an idea, a metaphor basically, that stuck with me for quite a while. And I'm going to just give you a very quick and dirty version here. So this is my COVID pup, Kohaku. Isn't he cute? He's just the most adorable. He never has accidents in the house. He doesn't chew things, and he's in great health. So he sleeps the whole night. He never wakes us up in the morning. Hey, who likes my puppy, Kohaku? Now we have to do this like deep pause before we learn. Do people here love this puppy, Kohaku? So cute. Alan's getting a lot of love, maybe more than the pup. Alan, I should have put you in as the picture and said, do you like my Alan? All right, I see some people loving on the puppy. Yay. Yeah, he's a wonderful guy. So sweet. It 100% is about the dog. All right. So, well, let me just ask you another question. Who would like to buy my puppy right now for less than $100 a month? Anyone? Yeah, can walk my dog less than $100 a month. Why not? Yeah, so you can see maybe there's a little bit of an issue here in these two concepts. And this is what Ash Maurya calls the innovator bias. So, as builders, we are very prone to be like, hey, I've solved this problem. What do you think? Like, do you like this thing I built? Hey friends, do you want to use this product that I made? And how do you like it? And that can cause us to have a little bit of poor signal in terms of the actual viability of our products. I mean, remember the IKEA effect? So we're humans. We know we have lots and lots of ways of distorting reality. Daniel Kahneman, who is, of course, the Nobel Prize winning, well, actually, it's a psychologist, but he won the Nobel Prize in economics, and he wrote Thinking Fast and Slow. And he says that there's basically one cognitive bias that is most prevalent and, the most hard to escape. And that one is confirmation bias. So we basically love to pay attention to evidence that supports our views. Many's the time that I've worked with a person, a designer or a founder who has said something like, let's validate my idea. And, my head just explodes because, of course, we are looking for that data that says, oh, we're right. So one of the things that we've got to do before talking to any people is to document our assumptions and our best guesses, and then make sure that when we're asking customers what they think and what they care about, that we have done everything so that our assumptions and biases don't influence them. So it's really hard because, if we admit that we don't know, especially for a lot of product managers who have that, truism of being all the responsibility and none of the credit, or none of the power to do what you want. It can feel like, oh, if I look like I don't know, then it's not going to look good for me. And also, if we think about when we make assumptions and then we basically limit ourselves. So we're really thinking about like, how can we make the best innovation? And a lot of times the best innovation comes from actually not knowing the answer. So I just want to suggest here that, we have to stop thinking about faster horses ourselves and learn instead that, for example, maybe people value doing the right thing. That is what Mark Tarpenning discovered, and he's the founder of Tesla, as you may know. He actually realized that when the Prius came out, the people who were buying it weren't Camry drivers, but they were actually Lexus or upmarket vehicles. And so that led to Tesla coming up with this great strategy of first designing cars for the most high-end sports car lovers, which allowed them to, not cannibalize or not have to have a sort of a mass market vehicle right away. And so, we now have the Cybertruck, which may or may not be from that same way of thinking. So I just want to go and cover kind of the key takeaways from this talk. First, values matter first. Second, your customers, not you, know what they care about. 3, ask really good questions and you can avoid a lot of engineering time. And I would love to hear your questions, so if you can put them in Q&A, that'd be great. And I think we will be able to answer those. I've put references in here and I'm happy to share the slides with anyone. And then lastly, before I forget, I also have a link which I can share. I'll put it in the chat for a mailing list that if you are interested in learning more about our values, customer perception of value, et cetera, we're going to be periodically releasing some information and writing for you. All right, Mike, can you tell me what's going on in Q&A?
Yeah, so we've got a few questions there. Hubba, can you give an example about what you said concerning interviewing? Be fakey encourages about what they are saying.
Oh, okay. So sorry if it sounded like fakey. I was saying vaguely encouraging. So basically, it's giving them the idea that you're really interested in what they're saying, that what they're saying is right, no matter what it is, and also maybe even questioning your own hearing of it so that they will give you more information.
Thanks, Laura. So another
Yeah.
question from Sandy. How often do you feel customers tell you what they want or what they think would be the solution, but when you dig in, you discover that won't actually meet their needs?
So this is a great question because I really want to be clear that what we're trying to learn here is not what do people want from a perspective of like what product they want or what features they want, or even maybe what problem they want you to solve. What we're really trying to learn is something a little bit higher up the chain of what do they care about. Product folks are great at coming up with innovation and coming up with new ideas and designs and things like that to solve problems. But what we really sometimes fail to do is learn whether people really care about either the problem or the way we're solving it. And so learning from their values helps us to basically guide the kinds of things that we're thinking of building or the ways we're going to communicate to customers. And so we're not really asking them like, what do they want?
There's a question from Jessica, and it almost relates back to some of Teresa's comments from yesterday, is how do you avoid asking biased questions?
Okay. So this could be probably its own talk as well, but number one is that you want to always ask open-ended questions. So never a question that's like a yes or no question. When you ask the question, you want to try to remove any of the kinds of words or phrases that give people an idea that there might be a right answer. So, if you're asking about, like when you went to the gym last week, how many like reps did you do or something that can kind of make people feel like they should have done reps. And so you want to maybe ask them something more like, okay, well, tell me what you did when you went into the gym and what did, just like making it be very factual.
I think for me personally, it's like the concepts of like net promoter scores are always a little bit, I feel like I'm being manipulated, that thing. And I won't say how many times on the Excel events I've asked various questions over their chat system and I come back with the, very black and white answer. And then I get a 1 through 5. How happy are you with the answer? It's like, well, you've answered my question, so I guess I have to give you a top score.
Right. Yeah. I am not a huge fan of doing qualitative research in surveys. Surveys are great for learning some factual things like is the customer a certain age or, did they do X thing? But it's very difficult to use it to have a sense of actual sentiment. So yeah, if you can avoid that, that's great.
Yeah, Darren has a great comment here. Once you have a sense informed guess as to what someone values, is it constructive to reflect that sense back to the person for validation? It sounds like you may have put a high value on question mark or comment.
Yeah, so I think that you can do this well and you can do this poorly. And so I think that what I usually do is say, well, I'm hearing that you say this, and I try to actually use their words if I can. Um, if because what can happen here is that it can sound like you're trying to tell them that it is uh, that you would prefer them to have a high value on X thing, but at the same time, you want to make sure that you did hear them correctly. So I think the way that Darren, you phrase this, it sounds like you may put a high value on X is good. You have the may word in there, which makes it a little bit less didactic or instructive. So yeah, I think that's a really good idea.
David asked a question. Is there a go-to book, article, or blog you would recommend for product market fit?
Oh, wow. Let's see. I think uh, there are a lot of things that sort of add up to good things. So if you look at the references that I put, let's see here. I would recommend kind of looking at all of these. The Brian Todd article is probably the most specifically about product market fit, and that video by Mark Tarpening is also a great example of how Tesla thought about it and were able to be successful.
You've got Alan's name at the bottom of your list too, as someone who's even present. So
Yes, exactly. Yeah, Alan. We're working on getting more like writing things. So that's again, if you want to sign up for Alan and I will be collaborating on some writing, and so please do sign up for that. Oh, I really should put the link in here. Let's see here. Let me do that. Okay. There you go. Yeah, please do. We'd love to have get some early readers of the things that we're working on.
the Brocker has a question. As a PM in a new job, how does one assess the current state of product market fit of the company? Like again, you're walking in and trying to make a determination over do they get it or does the company not get it?
Well, are you asking whether they get the concept or whether they're at product market fit?
I think both.
Okay. Well, I think that the Lean Analytics is a book, so that is a great resource, particularly for just understanding metrics and things in general. And that framework, where it's like, what stage is the company at, is a really good way to think about it. Like, are they at a stage where they have people who love the product, but they haven't quite figured out how to repeatedly get customers? Are they at a place where they're getting lots of customers, but they're not really making money yet? Like those are the ways to think about that.
So Duncan put a comment back in chat on the mom test as another good reference point.
Yes, I love the mom test. Highly recommend it. So the mom test is a little bit more like problem oriented than values oriented, but I think it's really, really great as a short guide for anybody who's interested in learning like quick and dirty customer development type techniques.
Well, super. Hey, Laura, appreciate your time. We're time to end. And again, remember, folks, we're just about to finish some big giveaways over on the main stage area. And so appreciate everybody attending, and thanks again.
Yeah, thank you so much.